Before that, Joe Hockey got everybody's attention, though, in the Q&A session at the National Press Club. The story was the $40 a tonne, you know, on carbon, and the government was suddenly starting to squirm in terms of its trying to line that up against what the Greens were saying. And so, once again, it was just an opportunity lost, wasn't it, for the opposition?
Well, it was an extraordinary week, I thought, last week for the Gillard government. They had 2 good days in a row. Now, that hasn't happened for a long time.
That's true.
The first day through the NBN and being able to hook up people, and the second day thanks to Turnbull for diverting attention. But still, you know, the critical problem is with the formulation of the carbon tax. Now, you'd think that if they had it all nailed down, they'd be releasing it tomorrow. I mean, they wouldn't be,
you know. But they don't have it nailed down.
No, they don't. They don't have it nailed down, and, you know, there are still a lot of problems to be sorted out, like the starting price, like the finishing price, like compensation.
That will all be done in time, but I know in the meantime they're bleeding heavily. But I think there was one other piece of good news for the government this week, and that was what the Conservative government did in Britain, and that's when they announced that they would be halving emissions. Now that has to give the government a talking point at least.
Well, I think it does, and it's an abstract idea in one sense because it's by 2025, and I mean it's pretty easy to be courageous about 15 years from now. But it does show that one of the things that the government's saying, which is that we need to be part of what is happening globally, is in fact true. There are things happening in other countries. There's a big debate as to how substantial some of those things are in China and other places. But clearly a Conservative government in the UK, a very close economy to ours in trading, but also culturally and so forth, they're actually doing something. Their politics is able to get somewhere on this issue, and ours
isn't. But they are a different economy. They derive their power mainly from nuclear and from gas.
And they know about smog.
They know about smog, but it is a vastly different economy from ours. And while ever China and the US are holding back, I don't think the UK moving is really going to shift a lot of votes here.
It may not shift a lot of votes, but it's part of the story.
It is a good talking point for the government. Yeah, it is part of the story, but it's not going to change the arguments.
Listen to this observation from Phil Williams, our London-based correspondent, after that story went to air on the BBC.
The big difference between Australia and Britain is that here it's for some reason no longer a headline issue. To illustrate that, on the BBC News when this announcement was made, it ran number 6. Just behind the story about the dog that fell over a cliff.
Now, why is that? Is that because they suspect it was really no big deal? That it was.
It's there's bipartisan support for doing something about climate change in the UK. Aside from the fact the economy is different, they all agree. So it's a totally different political climate there than here, because here we have a party that used to agree and now doesn't.
Which is what would have happened here if Howard had won the 2007 election. Because if he'd won, we would have had an ETS, and that would be rating about number 6 or number 7
exactly
after,
right.
You know,
that's the policy they took to the 2007
And we may not have even run the UK story on our news.
Yeah.
That's true.